there's a multitude of voices and decision makers in every phase of what we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the process can be challenging. So you have to have a vision, and you don't want your vision to get lost
Right.
amidst all of the sea of voices out there. So, and also I think casting isn't one of those things that you can be like, I wonder what kind of job I should get in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just become a casting director. No,
Right.
no, you can't. Sorry. You have to have an artistic heart. You have to have a compassionate soul. You have to love actors,
Right.
and you have to be interested in actors. Even more important, you have to be interested in them. So you can't just be like, I don't know, I fell into casting. I don't, there has to be a reason why you go into it, because it's not easy. It's
Yeah.
so hard. It's so hard to paint with people. Everyone has an opinion about who should be in the show. Costume designers aren't going to get that.
Right.
Production designers aren't going to get that. Directors of photography aren't going to get that
Right.
because that's later, but in the everyone has an opinion about actors. And so it's so important to just hang on to yourself.
Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman is a podcast on directing for anybody that's, quite simply, ever watched anything. Visit PeteChapman.com to get your official podcast merch, hoodies, hats, jackets, mugs, and other swag, and learn more about your host.
Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman is sponsored by the good folks at Scriptation. Scriptation is the Emmy Award-winning app for production that allows you to mark up scripts, transfer notes, generate breakdowns, and so much more. No matter where you fall on the call sheet, Scriptation makes it easy to go paperless, collaborate with your crew, and save hours of time. Go to scriptation.com/Pete to learn more and receive a special offer exclusive to Let's Shoot listeners. Now, on to the show. All right, welcome to episode 68 of the show. This is Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman, and today's guest is Linda Lowy. Linda Lowy is the casting director behind many seminal film and television shows that have left their mark on audiences worldwide. On the film side, I'm talking classics like the Bond film, The World Is Not Enough, starring Pierce Brosnan, and Nell, starring Jodie Foster, as well as seminal TV shows including Grey's Anatomy, Scandal, Dirty John, Friday Night Lights, and more. She is the 2013 recipient of the Casting Society of America's Hoyt Bowers Achievement Award and has 9 Emmy nominations to her name. She won 3 for Grey's Anatomy, Friday Night Lights, and Bastard Out of Carolina. I like that title. I've had the pleasure of working with Linda on 4 episodes of Grey's and 1 Station 19, and her ability to find talent is exceptional, especially when you consider the universe of actors she's been tasked to create over 414 episodes of Grey's Anatomy. That's a lot of people to cast and a lot of challenging opportunities to not reuse people and, build families. And it's really dynamic. At some point, maybe I'll come back next week and identify how many actors that she has cast on that show. I did not ask that question. But we will dive into her journey momentarily. Before we get to that,
The catch-up.
Since last week's episode, I've been on the grind. My episode of High Potential just had 5 location days in a row, which is not necessarily the norm in TV. You really want to be on stage to control costs and control the elements and all of that. But it's a really big episode, really great script, written by Mark Halsey, and we're out on the streets. So we were at Disney Ranch, we were in downtown LA, we were all over, we were in Bel Air, and I really love being on location and dealing with the challenges of making a location work, because you're not going to be removing walls, you're going to be thinking creatively about where to block people and put the camera. So I love that. I've finished the deck, or rather Michael Reynolds has finished the deck for the heist script that Candace and I are working on. And I'm really excited to finally share that with the team and get some feedback and try and use that to refine a cohesive vision as we move toward finding a production company or a producer and or cast, et cetera, for the film. And I'm diving back into Yellow Jackets to rewatch seasons 1 and 2 in order to prep for my season 3 episode. I like to get the show that I'm about to do fully in my blood, running through my veins. And I found that the only way to do that is to watch episodes and read scripts. Now, let's get to it. This is episode 68, starring the legendary casting director, Linda Lowy.
Roll sound.
Speed.
The interview. Take 1.
So happy to welcome Linda Lowy to the podcast. Really excited to learn more about the ins and outs of not only being a casting director, but your journey to where we are today. And my first question would be, where are you from? Let's take it back there.
Well, I am from New York, which was fortunate because I had I lived not too far outside of New York City, and I had the availability and parents who would take me to some theater in New York. And I think that was a great thing for me at an early age because I basically wanted to live in the theater. I just wanted to stay there and see, I wanted to be an usher. They took me as early as kindergarten and stuff. And I would cry when the shows were over and I'd beg to go back. And it's so different in those days because it was like the one-time thing. It was different. We had some movies, we had a couple of different networks on television, but we didn't really watch TV. My parents didn't even get a colored TV until somewhere in late grade school, I think. Yeah. They won a car at some kind of event, and they didn't need the car. They didn't want the car, and they traded that in. They got a bunch of stuff, and one of the things was a color TV. So, but we never really watched TV much growing up. So it's interesting that I ended up doing this. I went to Northwestern University for theater. And when I was in high school, I applied. I can't remember if I had an audition to get in. I think so. I went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts from 9th grade to 12th grade, just on the weekends, and I took their classes, and I went to the city by myself and took the train, and it was very exciting, and would walk down, to the American Academy from Grand Central Station. I also did a certain amount of cutting school and going to see theater because I knew how to take that train down to the city. So once I figured that out because of school, I would go down. I would even I figured out how to walk in for the second act so I didn't have to pay for it and find an empty seat.
That's crazy.
So yeah, I did that. And I would go see things like Hadrian of the Seventh. I didn't even know what I was seeing, things I didn't even understand. And I saw The Great White Hope, James Earl Jones and Jane Alexander. That was one of the things that I was it was the best thing I had ever seen in my life, But so there were these sort of incredibly influencing moments growing up in New York with theater. And then, here's one of the things, when I was in maybe 5th grade, my dad wanted to have a father-daughter afternoon. So he took me to the movies. And that was before movies were rated and you'd sort of go off the title. So he took me to see The Graduate. And he was so horrified, but not leaving his seat. And I kept looking at him we're not going to go, right? We're not going to go. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen. And that film I never forgot it. I never forgot how I felt. I never forgot. It's not that I thought about how did those actors get up there on the screen? I just wanted to go and be wherever all of that happened. I wanted to go into that room where it happened or that city. I
Right.
started to think about that, you know, and it
Here,
was so exciting.
here's a question. That's because I was gonna ask you, like, what was it that was speaking to you about the or from like these plays that you were seeing? But now I want to ask, what was there anything that you were able to distinguish in how you felt watching a play versus watching The Graduate?
You know, I think even at that early age, I could tell how much more you could do with a film in terms of production.
Mm,
Because even like for Peter Pan and things that I saw on Broadway, you know, technology had come to a certain point, but not to where it was in film. So there was a certain magic in film. And although I had seen Disney films, remember that in the 50s and the 60s, there weren't films so much targeted for
mm,
my age, for kids and for teenagers. It was before all that. So you were like going to see films, you know, like 7 Days in May, which I didn't even understand, but like I would go see it, you know, because there weren't a lot of films. You know, I saw It's a Mad, 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 Mad World in the movie
mhm.
theater, and I went to see lots of films, but there weren't a lot of films for us. It was pre-70s, you know, when
Right.
all the film explosion, and so anyway, it was such a innocent and interesting time to grow up. I'm really glad I grew up without a cell phone. I'm really glad I went all through graduate school without the internet or anything. You know,
Hmm.
that was a pretty we think about that, it was like the internet and then pre-internet, you know,
Right.
just like how we conducted ourselves. Because my kids always say to me, "But how did you know where you were going?" So, Pete, the thing is, I went to Northwestern. I took, like, a year off after I graduated. I graduated early because I had done a semester at Berkeley, and I went to graduate school in England, and I did a it was the first year that they were offering a sort of semi-arts graduate degree. It's like arts and education or something, but they had never really offered that before at one of the major universities, and I went to Durham University,
Mhm.
which I think you and I have talked about before, maybe, but anyway, if we haven't, I got a graduate degree there, and I was there, you know, for a year, I think total like a year and a half. I got there early to find a place to live. It's a very small town. It's I didn't even look at a map because that would require going to the library or something or, you know, you
Right.
didn't I just thought, "Okay, England is a small country. I will be near London, and I'll be able to go to the city." And how hard is it? I was so far I was on near the border of Scotland. So in those
Uh-huh.
days, there was no fast train. It was more like a 6-hour event to get to the north of England
Right.
because, you know, I'm right up there by Newcastle upon Tyne. And that experience was incredible because at Northwestern, I was a theater major. I thought I was gonna be an actor. And at the time that I went to Northwestern, there was no adequate theater to put on plays. So the theater building was condemned, and they
Mm.
hadn't built the new huge speech, you know, it's not even new anymore. It's probably old. They built it in the '70s, but it was they were building it, but it was before it was built. And so you were kinda lumped into these small theaters in Evanston, Illinois, that they would rent for various productions with seniors and stuff, and I was a freshman, and it was very intimidating, and it was not I was just like, all of a sudden, I was like, "I'm too nervous to do this. I don't think I can do this." And it wasn't even so much that the nerves, it was more the rejection, and if you're not good with that, If you're horrible with that, you're going to have a hard time as an actor.
Hmm.
If you have a hard time forgetting and moving on and just, I don't like rejection of any kind. I'm not saying that anybody does, but
Right.
I just didn't think I could do that for my whole life,
Right.
because there is that huge element in the world of auditioning and acting. You just have to be, you know, I've had
Do
so
you
many talks with actors about it. I feel like a therapist.
do you feel like you were able to kind of turn the table by becoming a casting director and having more empowerment in terms of the yes versus the no, even if it's only for one person per role?
Sort of. It didn't take that exact route, because I became a
Mm-hmm.
teacher of the deaf at Northwestern and I did a minor in theater. And the only reason that happened is because I passed a sign language class and
Mm-hmm.
I thought, ooh, that would be a fun thing to learn. And then one thing led to another. And then I thought, and I also didn't want to be dependent on anyone. I didn't want to have, if it, like an artistic degree could possibly mean having to depend upon someone helping me, and I didn't want that. I just wanted to be totally independent. So I had to do something else. I had to prepare myself for something else, even if wasn't even thinking about casting then. Nobody was. Here's why, because it wasn't until, this might not be correct, it's just how I remember it, but it was somewhere around the time of Kramer versus Kramer, that movie,
Mm-hmm.
that casting directors got upfront credit with everybody else. And because they didn't until that point, you didn't really think about how those actors got there. Not too much.
Right.
You didn't really say, hey, I think I'd like to pull all those people together. I don't know what we were all thinking, how they all got, and I didn't really think about that when I would see theater either, because nobody was ever listed in a
Now,
playbill.
how was it happening? Was it happening in some kind of unofficial,
They were
like,
just uncredited. They were casting
yeah.
directors. In the early studio days, it was more, they considered them secretaries. They would give it
Hmm.
to people would be doing casting, but they were also doing other jobs, I think. And it was more secretarial.
Right.
So, it just wasn't a profession. And then it was a big profession in the days of Mike Fenton and Lynn Stallmaster and Howard Fewer and, Marion Doherty and the huge, giant casting directors of the past. But for so many years, they didn't get credit.
Hmm. Hmm.
They might have gotten end title credit, but they just didn't get credit. And who stuck around for the end titles?
Right.
Nobody.
Right.
Not if you were just a regular human going to the movies. You just didn't. But what happened was, because became a teacher of the deaf, and I didn't become a teacher of the deaf because I wanted to work in a school. I never wanted to work in a school. I just figured I could somehow parlay that experience with theater. I didn't know
Hmm.
how. And through my graduate degree, at one point at Columbia College in Chicago, I taught a class. I taught a sign language class to acting students. So that was
Hmm.
cool. But that wasn't really what I wanted to do. And I didn't want to, my graduate degree, which was amazing, had to do with teaching drama in schools. And I focused mine towards deaf children, but I knew I didn't really want to do that. So what happened was very fortunate. In my early 20s, after graduate school, I went back to New York, and a company called TDF, have you ever heard of them? Theater Development Fund. They
Okay.
are the people that run the Half Price Theater booth.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
started the Half Price Theater booth, and they started that when I was actually there. They support, through a mailing list, Broadway theater, both off-Broadway, on Broadway, and they very much help in the off-Broadway by a thing called a voucher program. And they have a mailing list, and you can get discounted tickets and go to previews. of shows. And that's what helps fill the seats of the previews so it can get to opening instead of people waiting for a review.
Right.
So at that time, when I went back to New York, if you were a not-for-profit company and you got more than X amount of money from the federal government, you had to start providing for the disabled. And God knows, the Broadway theaters at that point didn't have ramps, and they didn't have, for like visually impaired, hearing impaired, whatever. They didn't really have much. And it was hard to get a ticket if you had needed an aisle seat because of some disability, or if you needed to be up front because you were visually, impaired. So this company, TDF, fell into we get all this money from the federal government, so we have to address this. So they were looking for somebody to run that program. I was 22 years old. There was no way but I must have seen an ad. Somebody must have told me. I wish I could remember how I got to them, but I went for an interview and I got called back for the big interview with the guy who ran the company. And the guy who ran the company, unbeknownst to me, was British. And he looked at my resume and he said, you didn't actually go to Durham University, did you? And I said something like, well, I didn't make it up. And he said, I'm from Durham and I've never met any American that's ever been there. So we talked about Durham for the rest of the interview, and I got the job. At 22 years old, I got this job to make this huge theater entity, accessible to the disabled, to make Broadway and off-Broadway. So it was very fortunate because, I was doing all the wheelchair, I was doing everything. I became like a little ticket office where people could come to me, and then I would go to all the different box offices. So I got to know all the box office treasurers, which was not a bad thing.
Right.
And I was able to secure tickets, blah, blah, blah. But what I really wanted to do was to start interpretive, sign language interpreted performances for the deaf. So I went to see the people that ran, the Schubert theaters, it's the Schuberts and the Nederlanders, right? At least it was in those days. And they just said, no, you're not doing that. And I said, why? And they said, because it's all unionized right down to the nails on stage. You can't, no one's going to allow you to do that. And it's going to be, maybe one day if you want a night for the deaf, you can do it. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do 1/3 of the orchestra. And, I was 22 years old, and I'm talking to Gerald Schoenfeld, who ran the whole Schubert operation.
Right.
And I think he called Hugh Southern, who was my boss at the time, who was the British guy who hired me, to say, that whippersnapper. So they weren't going to do it. So I had to kind of sit back on my heels. And Hugh said, let's just wait about 6 months and we'll go back. So I went to all the boroughs in New York and I got mailing lists, together, and I met with deaf groups, and I just met a lot of people, and I was able to sign to them, and I was able to get their names on a mailing list for the time that we would be able to interpret the shows. Because the Schuberts and the Nederlanders were basically saying, start off Broadway. And I was like, okay, so you're a person on a bus going to work, and you're looking at billboards, and you see, a chorus line. You want to go see that, just like every other person.
Right.
You don't want to go see Kabuki Medea down in bumfuck nowhere, Manhattan. You just don't want to.
Right.
So, wait, can we swear on this show?
Oh, you can do whatever you want, yes.
Okay. So I said that to them. They didn't like that. I was like, okay, whatever. So lucky for me, in those 6 months that we had to wait, a show called Children of a Lesser God I don't know if you've ever heard of it because you're too young, Pete.
Well, I know it became a movie.
It became a movie.
So
And
I didn't
first it
know
was
it
a
began as a
play.
play. Yeah.
It became a play. It was first was a play, and it came from the Mark Taper, which
Hmm.
I didn't know anything about the Mark Taper, and it was transferred to Broadway, and it ended up winning a whole bunch of Tony Awards. And
Hmm.
when it won those Tony Awards, the Nederlanders and the Schuberts called Hugh Southern and said that young, sort of arrogant woman that you sent us, she can do whatever she wants. So that's how it happened. And the reason I tell this story is because my journey at that point shifted
Right.
because now I had to audition. I didn't know I was auditioning sign language interpreters that I wanted to match the shows.
Huh.
So they gave me the third of the orchestra. They gave me the stools so the audience in that 1/3 of the orchestra could look through those interpreters onto the stage. And it wasn't like, having to move their heads or,
Right, right.
it was right there. The stools were in front of the stage. They weren't touching the stage, so we weren't breaking any union. I got them to give me a rehearsal with the cast, and we started auditioning sign language interpreters. And the we of the thing is I hired a couple of actors from the National Theater of the Deaf to be like on an advisory board, basically, and to work with me and help me pick people.
This is
And
at
it
23
was
years old.
22.
22 years old. I
Yeah.
love it.
22 and 23. I stayed at TDF for 3 years. And 3 or 4 years, 4 years. So it was unbelievable. The first show we did was Elephant Man with David Bowie in it. And David Bowie, God rest his beautiful soul, was so helpful. And he wanted to do press events and he wanted to do everything with me. And he wanted me to teach him sign language because he was a mime,
Right.
And he used to always say, Linda, if we got married, you would be Linda Lowy Bowie. And but it wasn't in a kind of lecherous way. And it was just so friendly and funny. And he was great. And he helped me a lot. And we did, so we started doing these assigned shows, and I would get a third of the orchestra. We did our own playbill for the deaf audience, sort of giving bios of the sign language interpreters and certain signs that we made up
Right.
for the names of the characters, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so that was my very first taste of casting, and I
Right.
didn't know it.
Right.
And later, when I met with a producer in Hollywood just when I first moved here, he said to me, "Have you ever thought about casting?" And I was like, "No." And he said, "You should." And I said, "Wait a minute, I have done a little bit of casting if you count this experience, but I never really thought of doing it as a profession." And he
Right.
said, "Do you like to buy or sell?" And I can't sell, but that's all of Hollywood, right? So I said, "Well, I can't sell, but I can buy. I'm good at buying." And he said, "Start in casting and maybe stay in casting. It's a great profession. You'd be good at it." And I met him because I worked on a movie in Chicago called About Last Night that Ed Zwick directed. And my friends produced it, and they called me and said, "Do you want to work on a movie? Do you want to be our assistant?" And that was the very first movie I worked. So that's a little roundabout. Listen, and I was in Chicago. This is another important thing. I was in Chicago, on and off from the time I started Northwestern. I was 17 when I went to Northwestern, and I stayed in Chicago on and off for about 10 years, maybe more.
Right.
More than that, because I kept going back and forth. And I was in Chicago in the years that Second City, Steppenwolf, Wisdom Bridge, Remains, Looking Glass, St. Nicholas Theater, Organic Theater, all those theaters were popping. And it was all about ensemble theater. And I
Right.
was able to go and watch, John Malkovich and Bill Murray in Second City and, John Belushi at Second City. And it was amazing times in Chicago then in terms of theater. And I learned about ensemble theater and I learned about it through watching it. And that very much affected my life as a casting director way later.
What is it that you look for? Because I'm always so impressed by what you do and what casting directors do. It's like any need that you might have for a television show, a film, you all have someone in mind that fits that need. Someone who fits it from prior work, someone who's yet to do it, but is kind of primed to move into a new role. When you're viewing all these plays and TV shows and films just on your own time, like how are you like cataloging all this talent that you're seeing?
At the beginning, I didn't catalog it at all. I
Mhm.
read a lot of books growing up. I still read a lot of books. And when I read a book, I make up all the characters in my head and what they look like and what they're going to be like with each other. And sometimes I switch it mid book and in the years at TDF, we got free tickets to all the plays. So I saw over 300 plays in that 4-year span. And I used to go with different friends and whatnot, and they, like, at intermission would be like, "See ya." And I'd always stay. I'd be like, "If you wanna go, go. I'm gonna stay." Because of the actors.
Right.
Because even if I didn't like the play, even if I wasn't even paying attention to the play, even if I didn't even know what the plot is or understand it, I would be watching the actors, and I would be sometimes saying, "Oh, wow. I saw that actor in that other play, a few months ago. He's much better here." Or I
Mhm.
would sit there and think, "Those 2 should switch parts. That would
Huh.
be really interesting if they just switch parts." And I would get in my head about all these things, and I didn't catalog anything. I probably didn't even look too much at the playbill. I just didn't know to then. I didn't care to I didn't need to know their names. I didn't think I wish I had because it might have served me later. But listen, sometimes when I would meet on a TV show or a movie, meet for an interview, I don't really love to talk endlessly about actors. I just don't know if I think it's good if you talk about like who's kind of the role model for this, like who's your
Right.
dream, I even don't even like that because then you get hooked on that. I like to stay so open. And also, I don't wanna, like, give all my I don't know. Ideas, like, anybody can put any actors, but sometimes you have a really good idea for something. I brought up in an interview once Alfred Molina, and
Mhm.
the producers literally laughed at me, and they
Hmm.
were like, "I think you're not thinking correctly about this film." And
Hmm.
I was like, "Why?" They said, "'Cause we want a bigger name. We don't want Alfred Molina. That he's a great actor and he's a great character actor, but he doesn't fit this." And I was like, "Okay." So we talked about some other people. I did not get that job, but Alfred Molina did get that job.
Huh.
So, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's
I
like
yeah,
sometimes
I
it just
understand.
doesn't I
It's
wanna talk
I
about the script. I wanna talk
yeah.
about what the script requires in terms of actors.
Mhm.
What is underneath, if you hope there is something underneath the writing. It's kind of like how I knew that someone like Gene Smart was right for Hacks
Right.
because I didn't cast Hacks, but I was at HBO Max, at the very beginning of all that. And I had cast her numerous times. I
Right.
knew what her ability was. I knew how was going to kill this role, not because of the humor that was on top, but
Right.
because of all the stuff underneath that was
Right.
emotional and devastating.
Right.
And we needed an actor that could cover it all. So, I like to talk about that stuff. And I feel like it's not talked about enough. I feel like it's just kind of all like, well, who do you think? Who do you think? Who do you think? And that's fine. But the big name thing and who, I don't know if that even exists anymore. Maybe a little bit.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I've listened to a couple of your interviews with people, with directors, and I
Mhm.
found it really interesting. Every single thing, pretty much that I'm always learning. And I was like, oh God, that's so interesting. Yeah, yeah. You didn't really talk about casting
Mhm. Mhm. Well,
with these directors.
with a lot of the TV directors who the majority have been, the casting is it's like it's this weird thing. I've just gone through with it on 2 consecutive shows actually where I was involved in casting, but like it was a person being introduced in my episode,
Oh,
but
yeah.
where they would be going for the remainder of the season, I knew not much about. And
Right.
so in those casting sessions, I mean, well, before that, it would be a lot of like, I'm trying to kind of get a data dump from the writers of like, where is this going? How much can you tell me? And like, what is it that you're looking for? Because I might find something that's really great for episode 3, but it may not be what you need in episode 11. And so it's this thing where like we're kind of not kind of, where we are involved, but we're not the ultimate decision maker and we don't really have all the information to do the best job, quite honestly.
Yeah,
And it's a challenge.
totally. I mean, just to be really honest, in the years in Shondaland, of which there were 17 years, it got to the point where I didn't want directors in the room. And I mean, that sounds so awful. Not because I don't like them, I love them all. It was just that sometimes I felt like after all the time that we've had, like on a show like Grey's or a show like How to Get Away with Murder, we knew so much that was kind of secret that no
Hmm.
one knew of what was gonna happen with the character or what that it became difficult to send the choices of
Hmm.
the director to Shonda or to, the showrunners, post show just because I felt like I knew them all. We all knew each other so well, and we all knew the stories so well that I just knew that, like, what was needed to get an actor approved. What
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
needed to what Shonda might need to see or whoever was making the ultimate decision might need to see, and even though as a casting director knowing the actor or as the director sitting there knowing the actor saying, "Oh, that I've worked with that person before, they can do that." I would
Right.
always say, "Yeah, but Shonda doesn't know they can do that, so you can't let them go." So we were always, like, running to the parking lot and dragging
Right.
act
Right.
it
Right.
was it
Right.
was kind of funny, but it was after a while, I was once tape and casted became a big deal. Because remember, for many, 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 many years, we didn't have that. And for the first 10 years that I was that I was casting and I was doing films, sometimes we didn't tape anybody. You
Hmm.
just remembered, and then you went back there, or you didn't really look back so much because you would have to have a big machine in the room, and somebody running the camera. It was
Right.
different. It was very, very different. So, when I first started casting at Disney studio when I started in the studio. I don't know if you knew that, but for 3 years, I worked at Disney when Jeffrey Katzenberg and Michael Eisner were there, when
Okay.
they had first gotten there, and they hired a casting director that they had worked with at Paramount in New York called Gretchen Rennell, and Gretchen Rennell was one of Marion Doherty's proteges, and she's just brilliant, and she came to be the VP of the casting department, and she hired me to be her assistant, and then I you know, work my way up from there. I had some very good teachers. And it's kind of where you sharpen your skills at the
Hmm.
beginning of your career. And I feel like for casting directors, we had to get studio approval and that was always easy. I don't think there was any time that ABC ever said, you can't have that actor. The
Mhm.
only time they might have called me was because and the reason they look at it is because you don't have the same actor on the same night doing another show.
Right.
So they're looking to make sure there's not that. But in those days at Disney, we barely had a fax machine, let alone we had this one big, like where you could shove a tape in and watch a tape connected
Right.
to the TV. And we would like push it down the hall to each other's offices if we needed it. But a lot of times it was broken and we just didn't use it.
Right.
It's crazy.
Hi, this is George Rexdrew. I play Edwin Payne in Dead Boy Detectives, and you're listening to Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman.
Transitions, a director's journey and motivational handbook, is Pete Chapman's book from Michael Weezy Productions. The reviews are in. Greg Berlanti says, "There's a reason why everyone who works with Pete falls in love with his work. The lessons he imparts here are invaluable. Do yourself a favor and read it cover to cover." From Sarah Gamble, Pete's sharing gold nuggets that will spare you a ton of wasted time and help you channel your drive, talent, and ambition in the most productive way. And from Jesse Williams, this business has everything to do with preparation and expectations. Transitions grounds lessons in reality while empowering our artistry to run free. Not an easy balance to execute. Transitions, a director's journey and motivational handbook, is available on Amazon and anywhere else you get your books. Don't forget about your mom and pop shops, people.
Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman is sponsored by the good folks at Scriptation. Scriptation is the Emmy Award-winning app for production that allows you to mark up scripts, transfer notes, generate breakdowns, and so much more. Personally, I use Scriptation daily on every production that I'm involved with. While directing episode 106 of ABC's High Potential, I was able to take advantage of Scriptation's new tagging feature to keep track of the many elements layered into my episode. Morgan, played by Caitlin Olsen, experiences visions that offer an alternate take on what the police think they know as the case develops, and these interesting pops are full of new information, wardrobe, props, stunts, etc., that require a heightened level of organization to realize your director's vision. This is just one of the ways I use the incredible features inside of Scriptation. Go to scriptation.com/Pete to get an exclusive 20% off Scriptation's premium toolkit, Scriptation Industry Pro. If you were to explain for a 5-year-old, like, what do you do, right? Like you forget the people who made the wrong mistake of hiring Alfred Molina and not you. And we just saw him. We were in New York and we saw him in Uncle Vanya.
How was it?
It was great. It was
Good.
We knew a lot of folks in there. We knew Anika Noni Rose. She was in it.
I love her.
And William Jackson Harper, who I had worked
Love.
with on it. So it was a great show.
Well, you worked with him on Love Life, right?
On Love Life, yeah. He's that there's a thing too about, like, it's funny, you get theater actors for gravitas, it seems, but a lot of them are really leading men and should be doing more. Leading men, leading women, leading actors.
Wow.
But that's a whole nother thing, right?
I know.
But yeah, so you get hired on a show, and like literally, what are the first things that you do? And maybe to be specific, let's focus it on a pilot.
Okay. I ask a lot of questions. You have a casting concept meeting, which is, what do you want? Who are the series regulars? Who's going to recur? Is there anybody that's going to join if you get picked up? Is there anybody in this group of people in this? Let's say you have 30 people in the cast. Is there, besides the 6 series regulars, is there anybody here that's going to possibly go on? If there's a father of somebody, will we see him again? Do we need to concentrate on getting somebody that we can make a deal with, or is it a one-off? Or how do we, not that you can do that when you're on a pilot, you can't, if it's just a pilot, which Listen, there's not a lot of those anymore. I don't think there's going to be a lot of those anymore. I think it's more going to be a neat little 6-episode package. At least that's what it seems like right now. You know what
Like
I mean? I don't.
they'll green light 6 episodes and kind of see what happens from there.
Yeah, because I think I could be wrong, but just in the things that I'm reading and talking to people about, you can sell something like that internationally. You could sell it.
Mm,
Whereas a pilot, if it doesn't make it, it's just money down the drain,
right.
right? So I think that's where the networks will save money, and streamers, they don't really they pretty much give you a green light for X amount of episodes, right?
Right.
So that you sort of, and they either put them all out right away, or you've got to wait, or they put 3 out, and it's all different, right? So
Right.
I don't know. This year where there wasn't one pilot, basically. I mean, maybe there were a few compared to the 100 that there were years ago, makes me think that everything is going to change and there's going to be a new normal. What do you
Mhm.
think?
I agree with you. I mean, my next show that I'm doing was, I think, ABC's only pilot, the
Mm.
show High Potential. And yeah, it's just, everybody seems very hesitant to spend money.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. I mean, what are you proving with all of this money on a pilot when nowadays people need, like your point is really great. People, want to see the first 2 or 3 on the premiere night of a streaming show so they can get that head start to see if they're really going to like it
Right.
and if they're really going to stick around.
I mean, a pilot is just sort of a waste of money. I mean, not if it hits and then you do a million more, but like, I think maybe that formula is an old one now.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they're still doing them, especially, there's a couple of comedies and whatnot, but I just don't know. It just feels like it's over. But let's say you are doing the template of a television show that whether it has more or not, I understand. I think so. Then I go to work and I'll ask, in that casting concept meeting, do you need some recognizable people?
Right.
And if so, in which roles and that sort of thing, so that I can be smart and, have the information when I talk to the agents and when I talk to the managers and when
Hmm.
I make my own lists. I know what I'm doing. And so then we go to work and I'm like, don't bother me for a couple of days. Like, let me just like be quiet and do my work.
Right.
And I'll come back to you every minute if come up with an idea and I feel like we should go after this person and they might have other things going on as I speak to the agents. You basically put a breakdown out. You put a breakdown of descriptions of all the characters that go to the breakdown services does that for you. You send them the script or you give them an idea of what you want and they send it out to all of the agents and managers in LA, New York, wherever you want. You tell them what
Right.
you want. They can
Now,
send it all across the country.
in that alone time, those few days when you're left to your own creative devices, is it kind of back to what you talked about when you were watching theater, where you're thinking of, or reading books, you're thinking about who might be the right person in this role, and
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
kind of
I'm
going through your
doing a lot
mental.
of like, that's always like whirring in my brain. It's like a
Hmm.
motor that never stops.
Right.
And so I'm always jotting that down. But at the same time, I'm talking to agents and I'm talking to managers and I'm sending out the breakdown and I'm trying to see what is the reality here.
Hmm.
And also, do the producers have an overblown idea of who might want to do this? So you go to those
Right.
people, right? I mean,
I know
they
exactly what
always
you mean. They're
do.
like, we want Meryl Streep in this as the waitress, and it's like,
Yeah. Even Shonda, she was like, do you think like Susan Sarandon, when we were doing Grays to play Kate Burton's part,
mhm,
she kept asking me about like the biggest names you can imagine. I was like, I don't know. But do you know Kate Burton? She's
mhm,
so good and she'll audition. Do you
huh,
know Kate Burton? She's so good and she'll audition. So I've had that happen so many times, Pete.
right,
So on Friday Night Lights, Pete Berg explained to me what he wanted in the coach. and he had a couple of ideas. And I don't really like his ideas, honestly. I thought, look, you want this show to be watched by everyone. You need
Mhm.
somebody, you don't want like the women that watch this show to kind of lust after the high school. You need somebody in the coach who's kind of, got charisma and charm and whatever. So, I had him look at early on, it was like in my, who do you imagine, like if you're reading this Friday Night Lights, the book. And I said, I just always had a feeling about Kyle Chandler. I had seen him in tons of stuff. I mean, not tons of stuff, but just that. And I always thought he was underused, not in the sense that he didn't have enough to do, but just that he wasn't on screen enough, but that they didn't give
Mm.
him enough to do because I thought he was capable of a lot. I
Right.
don't know what gave me that feeling. He just seemed like the strong, silent type, and nobody had focused on the strong.
Hmm.
And nobody could like drag that out. I just had that feeling.
Right.
So, this is where it gets tricky for a casting director. And I don't know if it was my age, because I was about, a bunch of years older than Pete Berg, and I just felt like I could do this. But so I sent him, Kyle's tapes and everything. He wanted to see a couple of people, and I had mentioned Kyle, and he kept saying, yeah, he's fine. I don't know, he's fine. So I said, oh, well, we'll see. I'll set him up. So on the day that he was supposed to come in, he was actually doing Grays, and he was on our set, but his call got pushed.
Mhm.
And I got a call saying, listen, can you push his audition at half an hour, because he's going to be late. We've pushed his call, so he doesn't want to sit around. And I said, yeah, don't worry about it. So when Pete, it was the only time that Pete came to my office, because he happened to be in Hollywood. Usually I would drive to Santa Monica and be in his office. It was so fortunate, and all the stars lined up. So I said to Pete when he got in there, I said, Pete, hey, listen, Kyle is going to be a little bit late. So he's on first here, so you could meet with him, but he's now going to be at 2:30. And Pete turned to me and he said, I don't want to see Kyle Chandler.
Hmm.
And I was like, what do you mean? He said, I don't like it. I don't want to see him. I saw his tape. It's not that I don't like him. I still think he's right.
Right. Right.
I said, why? He said, just because I don't. I said, okay, Pete, look, now a young, more inexperienced casting director might have been freaked out and said, I'll cancel the appointment. And Gersh, who's his agent, would have been it's a horrible thing to do because he was already
Right.
scheduled,
Right.
I stood up and I said, Pete, you're an actor. You know this. I am not canceling this appointment. You can meet him for 5 minutes. If you don't
Mhm.
like him, great. He's gone.
Right.
But it's only 5 minutes out of your day, and you're going to meet him, because if not, all kind of bombs are going to go off in his world, in the agent's world, and we're going to have to deal with stuff that, it's just not worth it. And so you're going to see him.
Right.
So he was like, whoa. He was like, okay, I love that. I love that about you. And, it was all that.
Uh-huh.
So
New York.
he came in. Yeah, it was New York. So in walks Kyle. And that was that. So, and Pete, I was so lucky to receive a major award from the CSA years ago called the Hoyt Bowers Award. I think it was in 2015 or 2014. I don't know. But anyway, I didn't put together, a friend of mine put together a video of people talking about, how I made a difference maybe in their lives, directors, actors. It was pretty great. And that's what Pete said. He was like, no, I don't like him. I don't want him. He's not right. It was great.
Right.
So, and then, he won the Emmy eventually.
That's
So
that's beautiful.
This is like this. So you have to hang on to your opinion, and you can't listen. You have to also be collaborative, and you have to know when to get off your own high horse and join jump on the bandwagon, because
Mhm.
that's all part of it too. But I don't back down that easily just because I just need to have the conversation. It needs to be a smart conversation, and it needs to, you know, I don't always just do what the casting concept they've told me to do in casting concept. If
Right.
I did, Chandra Wilson would not have her job.
Right. Right.
I was told that that role needed to be blonde and Caucasian. It was the only cast member in Grey's Anatomy that Shonda said, I want you to do whatever you want. I'm not even going to give anybody a last name. I want you to cast it like
Mm.
you see the world. The only thing I must have is in the role of Bailey, Dr. Bailey, I must have a blonde cheerleader type.
Mm.
And I said, okay, that sounds good.
And just as you molded over, you had a
No, I
different
saw
vision.
Chandra Wilson just auditioned for it, and I saw the audition. I became mesmerized. She was in New York then doing theater, she's
Mhm.
big musical thing. I took the tape out of the machine because we were still doing that. And I
Right.
walked down to Shonda's office. She was like on the phone. I just walked in because, those were the days, right? And I just said, I have to show you something right now. I was like shaking and I
Hmm.
put it in. And that's so Chandra Wilson tested against, in the days that we tested people, tested against Kristen Chenoweth,
Wow.
and
Wow.
Chandra got it. Yeah.
Wow.
And Kristen, and it was so funny because at the test, Kristen was Chandra's like one of her idols because Kristen was doing Wicked then on Broadway
Yeah.
or something. Yeah. So anyway, she's so great. But
Wow.
everything changed. Everything changed. And that started happening really early in my career, Pete. The early some of the early directors I worked for really helped me with all of that. They really listened to me. They were, I worked with Michael Apted. I worked with
Mhm.
Peter Yates. I
Mhm.
worked with Frank Pearson. These are people like Frank Pearson wrote Dog Day Afternoon. He wrote,
Right.
you know, A Star Is Born and like Cat Ballou. I mean, like, and this is so towards the end of all of their careers. And it was so fascinating to work with these directors and just be able to like touch their lives a little bit. And, you know, Michael Apted really taught me so much. I worked for him for like 10 years. And it's so interesting, Pete, because the reason Michael Apted hired me, I had done nothing.
Mm.
I left Disney to become my own casting person. And when I interviewed with him, I thought, there's no way I'm getting this. There was nothing on my resume other than I had worked at Disney Studio and I had overseen these films and that I had done theater and I had worked on About Last Night. It was like when you piece together your resume, you try to make it look really good. And when I went in there, I was sitting in the waiting room thinking, what can I say to him that where do we connect the two of us? How do I start this? I don't want to talk about actors. I always think, how can I not talk? I know I'll talk about Sting because Michael had directed the documentary Bring on the Night. And
Right.
when I was in the north of England and a little, graduate student, they sent me to a school in Newcastle to be a teacher's assistant to like work in the drama department and work in a school. And I really fought it. Because we had to do all these like outside projects. And I
Mhm.
was like, I don't want to go to a school. Send me anywhere else. Send me to the hospital. I don't want to go to a school. I don't want to be with teachers. They were like, you'll be going to that school. So I went to that school and Sting was a teacher then. And he
Huh.
was my teacher. And his name was Gordon Sumner and he taught English. And then all of a sudden I wanted so bad to be in a high school. I was like, this is fine. This is perfect. I love this, because I never even saw anybody that looked like that in my whole life. So I thought I was hallucinating. But anyway, when I said that to Michael Apted, I said, I knew Sting back in the days that he had the band called Last Exit. And I went to see him in the Working Man's Pub show. And Michael
Yeah.
was like, what are you saying? I said, that I knew him. And I told him the story. He said, we looked so hard. So it was kind of like Hugh Southern at the TDF job saying
Right.
you didn't actually go. Michael, here's another Brit who's saying, we looked for Americans that might have known him before the police.
Right.
And I said, well, you know, and we talked about Sting for about an hour, and then I got the job.
It's beautiful
And
though, right? Because sometimes
it's
like
just amazing.
when you're searching for something in those early years of your life, it's helping you find who you are later in this weird roundabout way.
Totally.
That's
Totally.
really cool.
And also you think, why am I doing this? That's why I never regret anything, including the whole, HBO Max experience. I just don't
Mhm.
regret anything because it all connects eventually. And no matter how upsetting something has been, or if you don't get a
Mhm.
job, or if you lose a job, or you think you made the wrong decision, something happens. I don't know when. And it could
Right.
be really, it doesn't even need to be about work. It could be that is kind of is enlightening in some way
Right.
and something that's unexpected. But listen, everything connects. Don't you feel that way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you look up and things that you did that you were coerced into doing end up turning into moments of kismet down the line when things align because of that thing that you complained about. I mean, I'm trying to think of, yeah, I don't
I
know.
was just going to ask you,
Mm,
because you've been doing this how long now? How long have you been your own director, not shadowing, not
yeah. Well, you know, it's such an interesting journey. I've been doing TV since 2017, but I have a whole life of two features in '05
yeah.
and '08 and, you know,
And thank God, right?
screenplays and yeah, and a production company. But as far as TV, I mean, the first episode I did was in October of 2017. Yeah.
I just want to say that, so the last time I was casting something where I was actually not overseeing it or figuring it
Hmm.
out how it's going to all go, but the last time I was actually, it, I was in the room.
Hmm.
I was in the room, and there was no COVID, and it was all pre-COVID. It was all in 2019. Then I went to do this executive job, and that was a 3-year deal. And then there was a whole it was a whole thing. So going back and starting this company now, and
Hmm.
trying to figure out, and you've been casting on tape. Have you always done the casting on tape?
It's been on tape. I did a live cast. Is that the right word? In person.
Yeah.
An in-person casting
Right.
for a show in Atlanta back in February. And it was a reminder of the value of that. We were doing them in person. There were three people, no, there were like two people that we wanted to see. And I was like, if I'm going to drive there, I don't want to just see two people. You know
Right.
what I mean? So
Right.
I was like, this person was kind of like my third choice. This was my fourth choice. Like, let's bring them all. And let me tell you, the young lady who was my fourth choice stole it from the other three people.
Um,
And it was like, just imagine we were doing it only virtually and we would have just been like, it's between these two. Like there's something that we're all missing. And when we take that kind of communal experience away and get to like meet the people, see them in the flesh, B, give a note in person and see them like make the adjustment or allow them to ask a question. I've always been a fan of like, do you have any questions? Like fire away. Some actors don't want to ask them.
right.
Some do. Sometimes when they do, they prevent themselves from doing an audition that goes in a wrong direction that might be hard to
Right.
come back from. And all of those things are really valuable.
It's just interesting, isn't it? I mean, look, I think I'm going to be able to do some stuff on a live Zoom
Hmm.
auditions, but there's just, yeah, I hope so anyway, because I'm definitely going to need to do that. I just don't know if I can sit and look at endless amounts of tape because takes some of the joy and some of the instinctual stuff that I used to direct actors out of
Hmm.
it. I mean, I was so I mean, that's where I think I shone, is that the word?
Hmm.
Shined was, in the room because I could say to an actor, "Okay, so we got that. Keep that. Let's add a layer of something else if you think it's appropriate." Just
Uh-huh.
because I was thinking about the script and what's in there. I used to always say to directors in the room, I have a question.
Hmm.
What why what do you think about, like, this paragraph? Like, what does this mean? Does that mean that person is thinking about going back to his wife? Or do you think
Hmm.
is that just like a inner whatever? I would be very
Right.
careful not to ever say, "Hey, I think that's what that means." I would always, sort of put it there with a question mark.
You should
So
direct.
if they said no, "Oh,
Right.
I wanted to
Yeah.
direct." I think it's the big sadness of a little bit. Sometimes I think about that. Why were you too scared to do that? Because I could have
Mm.
shadowed in any of the I think Shonda would have let me shadow anywhere, and I just didn't. I don't know why, but I think about it. I do think about it a lot now that I should have. Although I don't know anything about like the shot list and all that stuff but I think you could figure it out, right?
You can definitely
I'm
figure it out.
very, very good at talking to actors.
Yeah.
I'm very good at getting what I very gently getting what I want. And I was always so good, I thought, I feel like casting directors need to be good at this. And I tried hard to make sure that actors are happy when they leave the room,
Hmm.
that they did what they came in to do. And I would get behind and actors would get mad. And I would always say, look, I'm going to give you the same. I never know what's going to happen in the room. And it's not cookie cutter. You have
Right.
2 minutes and you have 2 minutes and sometimes you see it there. You see it right
Right.
there and you want to bring it up. Or an actor, something, they were only getting sides. They're not even getting the script and all the names are changed and all the
Right.
sides are changed. So they're really working at a loss. And I try to fill in the blanks.
Right.
So you don't really know just what you said about your fourth choice.
Hmm.
There's so much stuff in a script, in a episodic, in a movie too, with like a medium-sized role or a small role. There's so much missing. You don't know much about that character.
Right.
You're never gonna
Right.
know that much about that character. So basically, you're looking for like an alchemy, right? That's created by the character on the page as written and the actor that comes in and is standing in front of you.
Right.
Who's gonna make it sing? Who's gonna make it not just okay or not just pretty good, but is gonna blow your mind?
Right.
And you then Pete Berg taught me so much about this. You really have to make sure that if you're gonna have an actor for the length of a show, if it's a series regular, how much can they bend,
Hmm.
Pete would say to people, "Hey, okay, so do the scene again, and this time you're high.
Hmm.
I want you to actually sing it. Just sing
Hmm.
it. Sing the whole thing. Now I want you to play the other part, and I'll play the part you came into audition for." Anything that would just shake it up. And
Right.
it was
Right.
so interesting, those who could, like, step up to the plate
Right.
and those who could not.
Do you think that was designed to see who would be able to receive the most direct direction and work with it?
Do you remember Michael Jordan, Michael B. Jordan,
Hmm.
he was in Friday Night Lights in the second, when they went to the other school.
Right.
And he had been on The Wire and everything, but there was there was a period of time he wasn't working that much, and I loved him, and I brought
Right.
him in. He pre-read and all that. And then I brought him to Pete, and Pete did the most incredible thing with him. It was around the time that the black Harvard professor was going home and he couldn't find his key or something.
And
And he
then
got
they arrested
arrested.
him. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Obama had to call like everybody into his office, like the professor, the cop, the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Pete said, okay, I'm going to play the Harvard professor and you play the cop,
Hmm.
or something like that.
Right,
And
right,
it was
right.
so interesting to just turn the whole fucking thing on its head.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael was like, I'm going. We're going to go. I got it. It was so
Right.
cute.
Right.
And I was like, that's it. He got the job. That's it.
Right.
Done.
Right.
So it's
Right.
done. Yeah.
Right. Right.
So anyway, it's just so interesting to set the template of a show. It's like
Now, how
casting a movie,
Does
but
any of that change as you get into, subsequent seasons, or in the case of like a Grey's season 15, like, is your job fundamentally the same?
yes.
Mhm.
I'm going to say yes, because even though I know these families that we've created on screen, because they've all the characters have now had these lives, right?
Mhm.
And I was always the person that I always said, because, I never really tried TV till I did Grey's.
Right.
And I didn't think I'd be good at it. And I didn't think I would be able to keep up with it. But then there was something about the family of the crew and the family of the actors and all of us that I loved, that I really loved. And I thought, oh, wow. And, we didn't think it would even make it to be a pilot.
Yeah.
And then we thought, well, even if it gets picked up, what'll we do? Like a year or two? Because,
Right.
ER was on and we just didn't know. We just didn't know. And then I always said that if you have Sandra Oh going down a hallway and you
Mhm.
have, Ellen Pompeo going down a hallway, or Patrick, or any of the early, let's say you have Sandra Oh going down a hallway and Chandra Wilson going down a hallway. You as the audience I want them to not care which hall, be happy to go down either one. Not
Right.
to just say, I just really, do we have to go down? Like, I wanted to go with Sandra Oh.
Right.
Do we really have to go that way? I didn't want anybody to have to lean on anybody else. I wanted them to stand up straight. And I felt that about the guest cast as much as I could. The
Mhm.
recurring people, because recurring people can turn into series regulars, as we know.
Okay.
But yes, the reason I say yes, it would be the same, is because I want to stay the same. I want to stay the same, have the same openness, the same excitement, and the same need to do the best job I can as a casting director, and the most creative job I can do as a casting director. And so I don't want to become tired of it all,
Right.
So that's why I say yes. I think we have to kind of listen, what becomes an easier job after 15 years, even after 2 years, you have a roster of actors that you've seen that everybody likes, that you're like, oh, we can use them later. That's why I
Right.
always say to actors, just because you don't get the job doesn't mean that you're not going to get something better later, because maybe you're being saved for something.
Right.
Maybe you look too
Right.
much like someone else that's in it and you don't even know that.
Mhm.
Maybe, we want to use you in another show, because in Shondaland, we didn't for a while there, until we didn't sort of, we were very careful about that. You had
Right.
to wait X amount of years before you could be on another show.
Right. What are for the directors who listen, of whom there are many, like, what are your, semantics can come into play, but like, what are 3 things that you've noticed that directors should try to avoid in working with casting directors and in the casting process? And then maybe what are 3 things that are signs of you're gonna make it, kid?
Let's start with the directors. I think respect
Mm.
for the casting director has got to be there. We are the ones that are in the trenches. We are the ones that are going through hundreds of people sometimes. And, or let's say, you know, I don't know how many tapes now, because it seems like with each role, agents just send tapes of actors, and instead of in the room where you only have time for 20 people to audition, so you're going up against 20 people. Now you could be going up against 70 people because
Right.
you're looking at them, because it's so easy to say to a agent, just send the tape,
Right.
whereas before we'd be like, we're full up now, we can't, but like if it opens up again, we'll consider it. And obviously there's so many people that aren't right for a part. It was just easy to say, we're done, we can't fit anybody else in. And so I don't know. I just think respect for the casting director, and don't ever not listen to the casting director who has been with the show since the beginning, or been with the show for X amount of seasons, and you're a director coming in to do one episode.
Right.
Even if you've been there before 2 years ago, a lot has happened since then. So don't forget about collaboration, that we're all kind of on equal footing here. So I would say that's a big one. Don't let the actor out of the room unless you've seen what you need to see. I saw that happen so many times. Don't trust a tape that is halfway there. Have them read again, because you might not get it. You really
Right.
might not get it, even if you've worked with that actor before in another show. I had that so many times. Oh, I worked with them already. I already worked with them, and they're great.
Right. Right.
And I never, yeah, but I haven't, and I didn't see it. So, and like, I
Right.
don't know. I wouldn't be arrogant about it in any way, shape, or form. I'd just be wondering. I just want the best thing for the show.
Right.
So there's that. And I don't know, be nice. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of, like, in the early days, directors that I felt like thought they were like God's gift to, the universe. And it's just kind of like, take the ego down a little,
Right.
it's just, we're all
Right.
doing the same thing. We're all trying to do this. So it was more sort of about collaboration, I think, at the beginning. It's different now, it's different now because it's really kind of that collaborative. I mean, do you feel that when you're on a show? How do you communicate with the casting director? How do you feel like you want more communication on this day of these days of cast it, or?
I enjoy the communication. I mean, for me, it's an opportunity to learn, I mean, even in the casting, I joke, like, when I've casted my features, like, I would get better descriptions of the characters from the actors sometime. When they like might talk about the role, they'd be like, well, it's like this, blah, blah. I'm like, that's exactly what it is. Thank you. I'm gonna use that moving forward. So there's always an opportunity to, like, kind of crystallize whatever the intention is by having people who are all collaborating, trying to wrap their mind around the theme, the idea, or whatever. I've been having more casting interactions because I'm doing more kind of smaller episode runs where there's a need for casting in each episode or whatever. And I've been enjoying it. I love it. I think the respect is key. And I think one thing you're mentioning is that you just have to know that you don't know it all, and be looking for people who can help fill in gaps and blind spots that you don't always know you have.
Well, listen, it's like anything else. Sometimes you don't know what you want, but you know what you don't want.
Mhm.
And an actor, the whole point of casting is process of elimination, and
Mhm.
also process
Mhm.
of shining light on something you didn't even realize. Like, an actor will come in and read a scene, and they'll find something in it that you never even thought of.
Right.
So you're like, oh my God, I wonder if
Right.
the producers even know this, that this could be interpreted this way. So then
Mhm.
you bring that
Mhm.
actor for callbacks, and then you talk about that. And then it becomes like this interesting thing, and it's so mind blowing. And if you have a director, I'm just thinking of like episodic directors. If you have a director like Allison Liddy Brown, who and you have
Mhm.
interviewed, you're just both in the room going, oh my God, oh my God. And you're open to it and it's fluid and it's like, oh, this is amazing. We didn't really think of it like this.
Right.
So it's kind of like, have fun. Like, let's discover this together. It's
Right.
not you're right or I'm right. It's no one's right. It's just about it's just a discovery. And I think, I've worked with so many great directors. They all teach me stuff. I have no, I don't really have any criticisms. It's just what I know is works the best in terms of like, having a good time while you're getting to the final choice.
Right. Right.
And just being respectful of each other. That's all. And hearing each other, like
Right.
hearing each other and knowing like, how do you feel inside when you see that performance?
Right.
I know you thought about you might want to get that, but like when you look at this performance, doesn't this bring something else to it that you hadn't even thought of? So when a
Mhm.
director says, I want this, I kind of sometimes I want to get that, but I want to go this way. I want to go
Uh-huh.
around the corner and
Yeah.
still go to the same destination. Something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. I
Something
love
like that.
that. I love that. Is there anything about the craft of what you do that I have not asked you that you would want to be sure to make a point about?
Well, I think, in this world of corporate Hollywood,
Mhm.
and we have the ability, no matter what the corporate demands are, no matter who the flavor of the month is, to make a difference. And if you don't hang on to your own opinion,
Mm.
if you don't fight for the people that you think could make a difference to the piece, then I feel like we're kind of casting directors can be casting offices, casting departments can be kind of shoved to the sidelines if you're just sort of, yeah, 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 you're right. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Let's do that.
Mhm.
I mean, so that's one thing I think about a lot that you're going to get crushed
Right.
in the traffic jam. The creativity is going to get crushed in the traffic jam of all the people that are making decisions up the
Mhm.
line.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you've had that happen to you, Pete, as a director, because you think something is great that and they don't want it, and it's not even
Oh
a
yeah.
discussion. It's just like,
Yeah.
take that out. I don't want to do it that way.
Right.
And it's like, well, can we even talk about it? So I just listen once again, when you have to jump on the bandwagon, but you also, it's all about timing. So you just have to feel that out. So there's a multitude of voices and decision makers in every phase of what we do, right?
Mhm.
So the process can be challenging. So you have to have a vision and you don't want your vision to get lost
Right.
amidst all of the sea of voices out there. So, and also I think casting isn't one of those things that you can be like, I wonder what kind of job I should get in Hollywood.
Mm.
Maybe I'll just become a casting director. No,
Right.
no, you can't. Sorry. You have to have an artistic soul and you have to have you have to have an artistic heart. You have to have a compassionate soul. You have to love actors
Right.
and you have to be interested in actors. Even more important, you have to be interested in them. So you can't just be like, I don't know, I fell into casting. I don't, there has to be a reason why you go into it because it's not easy. It's
Yeah.
so hard. It's so hard to paint with people. Everyone has an opinion about who should be in the show. We used to
Mhm.
like go through the gate with our thing, and the person at the gate would say, hey, I love what you did there, but I didn't really like that actor so much in
Right.
this other show I saw.
It's like,
It's like,
thank you.
okay,
Appreciate it.
thanks. Everyone
Right.
has an opinion about actors. Costume designers aren't going to get that.
Right.
Production designers aren't going to get that. Directors of photography aren't going to get that
Right.
because that's later, but in the everyone has an opinion about actors. And so it's so important to just hang on to yourself. And I think also it's important to see the classics, go
Mm.
to theater, read books. You have to That's a very important thing, I feel. You have to know the history of what it is that you're
Right.
doing a
Right.
bit, right? You think about like the old movies that have, inspired you, or the old, or television shows when you were growing up that inspired you to do what we do. So you want to be sort of well-rounded in that department. So you have like some context, right?
Right. Right.
And so that's a very important thing to me. There's so many things, Pete. I mean, we could talk
Hmm.
forever about, you know, actors and who's right for something, and what have we liked, what ensembles have we liked and why.
Right.
And I just hope I have the chance to continue doing it. I don't know. It seems like we're in a different time. I'm not
Well,
sure what's going to happen.
in the in the in the in the interest of maybe there's something for us to have as a North Star, like what is there anything you're excited about as we stay alive for 25, about where the business may be going, what the storytelling and casting opportunities might be, just anything in that regard?
I mean, with the contraction of Hollywood and everything we're reading about it, it just seems like right now people are just jumping onto jobs, whatever comes they take,
Hmm.
instead of being picky, because you
Hmm.
can't really be picky right now. And I don't like that so much.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I just and so it makes me think about the old days and how great it was and how fun it was to, like, go to work and, like, all the casting sessions and figuring everything out on, like I would do, like, 4 or 5 shows, and
Yeah.
I would be busy all day long every day, and I would do pilots, and I would do I would do it all, and now it feels like it's all kinda changing. I'm just hoping for good material that I can
Hmm.
dig, my brain into, and I like discovering actors, and I've met a lot of actors in these last years, young actors,
Hmm.
going to theater, and in New York, in London, here, that I would love to be able to have the opportunity to cast. That's how I always did it. I always brought, like, a Chicago element to it because of all the
Right.
actors I knew there, and, like, theater people that I have worked with. And I just hope I have that opportunity one more time,
Yeah.
or a little bit more, because it must be very hard for actors right now.
Well, maybe, I've got stuff I'm trying to get made, so that would be great if
Come on,
I
Pete.
could be
Come on,
part of
Pete.
that one more time. And in the
It
in
would
the
be
show,
nice if we could connect like that.
it would be. I know it would be great to experience everything that you're talking about from that Genesis period. And to the point that you just made, I just did You for Netflix, and they hired a young 22-year-old Brit who just won the Olivier Award for Sunset Boulevard, Tom Francis.
Oh my
And
god, how
I
great.
I premiered him or debuted him in my episode, and it's his first TV show ever. Like, um,
That's a huge deal, Pete. You're his
yeah,
first director in that regard. That's a big deal.
yeah, and it was great because he was so excited about it. You know what I mean? And wanting to do a good job. Dealing with the cameras is a little maybe different than. I mean, that Sunset Boulevard production has a video component, so it wasn't totally new, but folks are still looking with a creative eye about how to complete these ensembles. So let's hope for
I
the
mean,
best.
that's really, really exciting. I keep finding people that are doing, like, indie films or whatever, and I keep saying, "Do you need any young actresses? I just met someone who graduated Tisch. I just met
Hmm.
someone who just graduated from USC." I have, all these people that I would love to give an opportunity to again. And there was something about working on all those shows and also doing Friday Night Lights at the same time,
Yeah,
that I always had roles, and I could, like, start people's careers. I could,
yeah,
like, "There you go,"
yeah.
and that felt better than anything, and also restarting people's careers, you know? Anyway, I just would love to feel that again. I don't think I'm done. So it's just finding a project that I am going to be inspired by.
Yeah.
And I just have to be careful because, you know, it is kind of a time where you just feel like, oh, great, I'll do it. Not sure that I'm
Right.
that person, but we shall see. Because I don't really know I feel this is very different for me. I don't, you know, as an independent casting director, again, not having like an infrastructure, it's just different,
Right.
you know.
Right. Well, I know it's coming. And I hope we can do
I
something
might have
together
too many
again.
opinions these days. Who knows? Somebody said that to me. They were like, you know, producers like these days, they just sort of want to just get it cast. They don't really want to hear sometimes. So I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But I
Well,
don't
I mean,
understand.
the work will show that, you know.
Yes, true.
The work
True,
will show
true,
that.
true. True,
Well,
true.
this has been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate your time and your wisdom and just sharing the journey. And it's been awesome.
Well, you're an angel for wanting to interview me, and I really appreciate it. It was really fun. It's really fun to think about all that stuff. And it really makes me, you know, kind of long for it in a way when I talk
Mm,
about it. So it's really good for me rather than sitting here going, I wonder what's going to happen here.
yeah.
Anyway. And it also made me want to contact Else and Liddy Brown, say hi. So
Yeah.
that's
Say
good.
hi.
Yeah. And say hi to Kelly, please,
I
and
will.
Indigo. And I'll
I
see you
will.
soon over here. That's for sure.
Yes, we will. This has been great.
Thanks, P. Thanks so much.
What's up, people? This is Pete Chapman. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter via @PeteChapman. Follow the pod on IG via @Let'sShootWithPeteChapman, and hit up our mailbag with questions, suggestions, or hey, donations if you're feeling like it via let'sshootwithpetechapman@gmail.com. And just in case you need to know how to spell it, that's Pete with the last name CHATMON. Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman is produced and edited by the multi-talented cut creator Tristan Nash. Assistant produced by the young mogul Jada George, and features the wonderfully gifted Kelly McCreary as our announcer. It's written by yours truly, but I mostly come up with these questions on the fly, which you've probably noticed. Go ahead and get your podcast swag via PeteChapman.com and leave a review on iTunes if so inclined. That shit matters. Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman is sponsored by Scriptation. Scriptation makes it easy to go paperless on set, increase your productivity, and save hours of time. Let's Shoot listeners get a special discount on Scriptation Industry Pro. Go to scriptation.com/Pete to learn more. So there you have it. Thanks for listening, y'all. Next week, join us for a conversation with Tara Mealy, the director behind Arrow, Batwoman, and most recently, the last 2 episodes of Apple's hit show, Lessons in Chemistry. In the meantime, stay safe, spread love, and keep creating.